Did you know that the pet care industry is a billion-dollar industry and it is continuously growing? But are the people who care for your pets growing as well? I'm Dara Forleo, and on the Business of Pet Care, we are going to talk about what really goes on behind the scenes of those grooming tables, those daycare walls, and those social media filters. I'm your host, Dara Forleo, and today's guest is Marcus Rattigan, founder of Hillbrook Sport Horses. Originally from Ireland, Marcus has spent over 2 decades training and developing sport horses in the United States. His business is built around this world-class horsemanship that we are going to talk about, training both horses and sometimes their riders for peak performance. Marcus, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Dara. Thanks for having us.
I'd like to ask, you have a different approach. And your approach is really with starting horses and that solid foundation. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see new trainers are making out there?
Rather than to mistakes, I think it's really a lack of spending time with older professionals. I was definitely growing up in Ireland. We had access to a lot more unique trainers, people that have spent years just highlighting how important the beginning phases were. A lot of our top riders would also produce young horses in the winter. And that side of things has changed a lot as the show season now is 360. So the top riders are constantly on the show circuit. There's limited access to seeing what they're doing. There's less potential for working students to come through the system of learning. And it's all about getting to go to the horse shows. And at horse shows, it's about the finished product. It's not about spending time studying the horses from the foal age, yearlings, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and understanding where their brain is at, where their physical body is at, emotional status is. So I think it's becoming more and more a lost art. And we see this conception of let's just get the job done quickly. The horses are rude. It's easy to get them going and then we'll jump on them and we'll fix it when we're on them. So
you kind of said something a little interesting that is, you said, a lot of that people are on the road more. They're right at the shows year round, a lot of travel, and that there aren't a lot of apprentices or working students that are at I would guess the stables as much as now they're learning on the road as well. So that probably plays a really big part of that.
It's a huge part because, for want of a better word, the horse shows are a bit like a circus, right? It's all the performance. It's not the weeks leading up to the event that they're seeing. And, the difference between a toddler and a middle school or a high school kid is massive. It's no different with animals and horses. The way that their brains are wired, what they need to be able to learn to focus and to go through the process is very different. And I think unless you're around that all the time, producing horses all the time, you're just not thinking quick enough. You're not thinking sharp enough. You don't have a strict plan of what you're going. Look, every plan is built to change, but if you don't have a foundational plan, if you don't understand what that's going to look like, what the horse is going to need to do when it's a 10, 12, 13-year-old horse, you're missing massive steps. A lot of people are just thinking about how can I get this horse ready and get him into the ring. I think with us at Hillbrook, we're looking at the longevity of this horse's career. We want this horse to go into the show ring from 4-year-old all the way up until they're 18, and be healthy and be sound, both physically and mentally.
So how do you go about building that confidence? How do you go about developing that foundation? what, like, your foundation, what does that look
My
like?
foundation, so for instance, if we get a 3-year-old coming in, it's unhandled, it hasn't done anything, it's we look at the emotional side first. So we're going to watch how this horse comes into the farm, how it comes off the trailer, how it looks around its new surroundings, how it adapts to other horses, to the staff that are here. All those things are paramount. That's going to give us our baseline of how a horse transitions through stress, through new beginnings. So once the horse is settled in, I normally leave them for a week or two if I can, not doing any work, just leading them in and out, kind of getting to know who they are, figuring out what personality they have. Just like humans, we all have a personality. I don't think you can force any horse into a box and say, hey, this is who you're going to be. So you have to study and find out if they're a bit quirky, if they're a bit sharp, if they're quiet, if they're personable, if they're involved in human connection, if they have no time for humans. Huge amount goes into that process. After that, I like to work them a lot on the ground, figuring out again, everything in a system has to fall back to the foundations. So the first foundation is to create happiness, to teach the horse how to use its body, how to think, how to relate to situations that are happening. How are you going to react to me making a big noise? Even just touch, gentling. There's so many components on the ground that we look at. And once we find that the horse is starting to stretch in their body, they're starting to use their body, we're also taking that time to create fitness and to check in with soundness, to check in with their strengths, their weaknesses, what gait is better for them. Some horses have a fantastic trot, not a great canter, vice versa, their walk as well. So I'm kind of always thinking, what's this horse going to need to get to the point that I'm going to be able to ride it, and that it's sound, it's comfortable, and it's physically putting body on and a top line to make it useful for its job.
Yeah, that's really cool. So how do you tell? What are some of the signs that those horses over those 2 weeks that they're, getting into their routine, or that they're ready to start training with you?
Well, I like to put things into an easy conception point for people, because I understand that I do this all day, every day. And I like a great sort of repertoire with my client, who also 99% are fully invested in the process. They want to know, they want to understand. And, I always say, great movie Ratatouille, the children's movie that everyone can cook. And I believe it's the same with horses. Everybody can have a relationship with horses. We just have to give it time to understand what that looks like. So just like any person going into a new environment, they're uncomfortable slightly, they're nervous. If, let's say, a fitness component, if they're sitting in an office all day, they might not be working out, they might not be physically fit. A lot of these young horses coming in are not fit. Their body is tight, they're wild looking, their eye is large, their noses are inflamed, so we're looking at these components. We're looking at how the horse is taking its breath, how the horse is dropping its head, how it's looking for interaction, wanting to be part of what I'm offering it. As that builds up, you then see that the horse is ready to progress. That can take a week, it can take a month. It just depends on who the candidate is, right?
Yeah. I want to go a step back, just because some of our listeners may not know exactly what a sport horse is. So do you want to give us a little how you came up, what that means? And you know what I'm saying?
It's a modernization of breed and sport, right? So sport horse is encompassing a huge category of horses now. Really what it means is horses that are athletic, that are in the mindset to be a sport animal. We can go more direct into breeding and specializing in breeding for discipline, for type, for what we're looking for. But, there's a huge level and a huge spectrum of horses, from your average happy-go-lucky riding horse to your Olympic horse. But they all fall into sports because they're doing a sport.
That is perfect. Thank you. So I just wanted to say that is great. And we are going to be right back after this commercial break for our next segment. And that is going to be turning nervous horses into confident performers. And welcome back to the Business of Pet Care. Loving what you're watching. Do not miss a moment of the Business of Pet Care on any of your favorite Now Media TV shows, for business and breaking news to lifestyle, culture, and everything in between. Now Media TV is streaming 24/7, ready whenever you are. And we are back. Marcus Rattigan, the founder of Hillbrook Sport Horses, and a passionate trainer known for transforming shy and anxious horses into confident performers. In this segment, we are talking about how to earn a horse's trust and build mental strength, especially when nerves are holding them back. So welcome back. Thanks, Marcus. It's good to have you on here. We're kind of going back and forth here. Really, what is it about the horses that really causes them to panic or lose confidence in their training sessions or settings?
Look, okay, that's it can be a bit of a broad question there. Okay, so
yeah,
I'm going to look at, you have two different types, really, just to make it brief, right? You have your young horse coming in, again, unhandled, untouched, doesn't know what it is. We go back to personality. Some horses, genetically, depending on their sire, depending on their dam, will have a certain amount of blood. Sometimes the stallion can be a bit nervous, a bit sharp with things, or the mare was a bit sharp or nervous with things. Yeah. And that can be bred through the baby. So how I'm going to handle that situation over a horse that's coming from a trauma experience would be similar, but also quite different, right? So
right.
A young horse that's coming in for training, again, just straight off the bat, hasn't had any handling, is really, again, about teaching them, how do I deal with pressure? How do I deal with being asked to do things that I don't feel comfortable in? Trust. Trust is huge. Okay. It's a foundation of everything. And also being a vulnerable person. Look, I'm 6'3". I'm a big guy. I played rugby. I'm not what you're going to be looking at going like, oh, he's nice and gentle. But you have to let your soul come out when you're training, and you have to have your empathy button tuned in. And
they know it right away.
Yeah, 100%. Are you empathetic to the fact that they're scared, or are you annoyed that they're scared? And obviously you have to be empathetic, right? There's a time and a place for structure and sort of saying, hey, you've just stepped over a boundary line that's made this unsafe. We're going to have a conversation about what that looks like. But if you're nervous, that's my job to create an environment that you don't feel nervous anymore, right? If you have a trauma case coming in, trying to find out history can be very difficult, right? So I definitely have techniques and training, whether it's through desensitizing if they're at that point, or under tack if it's at that point. And I like to try and stimulate situations that encourages the horse to react, allows me to study what the reaction is, and then come back with a plan. Rome wasn't built in a day. Nothing has to be done in that one session. And I think that that's a huge problem. I indeed made it many times, especially as a clinician or in a group of people, trying to show them that I know what I'm doing. As you get older, you spend more time, you walk away and you say, hey, let's come back tomorrow with a better plan. Let's help the horse through that. Sometimes it's physical. Sometimes it's emotional. Having the right team of veterinary care, body workers, healing workers, communicators. You have to be open. It's not for everybody, but neither is your job either, right?
Yeah, and they do definitely sense and have that vision around themselves walking in to go, is this a good place for me? Is this a scary place? What's going to happen? They're sensitive to all of that, and I don't think a lot of people think about that or even understand that themselves. When you're building trust with them,
and
go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. It just leads back into what you're sort of saying, is that training isn't just in the arena. It's not just your session a day that the